Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about the Narcissistic Harem. What do Genghis Khan, Montezuma, and King Solomon all have in common? They had extremely large harem. The size of the harem was a reflection of somebody's power and virility. King Solomon was known to have around 700 wives and up to 300 or more mistresses in his harem. Genghis Khan was considered to have more than 2,000 women in his harem. Many of the people in harems were there involuntarily, that is to say, they were slaves. Nowadays, humans are no longer considered property by most people, but that doesn't mean that the harem has lost its place in the world. It just doesn't mean exactly what it used to, although its function is still the same. Pathologically narcissistic people often create harems, and it's for a similar reason. The way the word harem is used in this context applies universally to men and women. Women can have harems, men can be in them. That's really the only thing that has changed. The people in them are still used like objects, and they are still a symbol of power. The word harem usually makes people think of sex or sexual relationships, and while this is often still the case with the narcissistic harem, it isn't the only one. Sex and anything else only matters to narcissists if it's how they receive various forms of validation, or what we often call narcissistic supply. This is the true goal of the narcissistic harem, and because of this, there could be people in the harem that the narcissist has never slept with and never would. For example, a narcissist seeking sympathy rather than sex may still have a harem of people that they farm for sympathy. A narcissist seeking admiration rather than sex may have a harem of people that they farm for admiration. A narcissist needing to be needed or to fix others may have a harem of people that they know fit this bill. Many people who don't believe the narcissist in their lives has a harem might hear this and realize that that's not true. It's just not about sex or romantic relationships, that's all. The behavior and needs of narcissists usually coincide with how they receive and process this thing we call narcissistic supply. That is the supply of admiration, sympathy, attention, sex, whatever it is they need to validate themselves as worthy human beings. A narcissist who needs to be feared might be a bully. A narcissist who needs to be desired might be promiscuous, either physically or emotionally. A narcissist who needs to be pitied might behave like a victim. A narcissist who needs to be needed might behave like a hero or a caretaker. It all depends on what they have learned means power in their lives and how they have learned to get their needs met. For a narcissist, getting their needs met usually translates into feeling better. This is why it doesn't matter if the thing making them feel better is actually detrimental to them or anybody else in the long run. If it makes them feel better now, that's all that matters. Narcissistic people cannot create, regulate, or sustain their own self-worth. Without a constant supply of validation and attention from others, the narcissist's self-worth cannot be regulated and it will drain away. Think about a pitcher with a hole in the bottom. When any human being loses all of their self-worth in this way, a suicidal crash at the bottom is essentially inevitable, and a true narcissist is much closer to the bottom already than a person who has healthy coping mechanisms and who can build their own self-worth. So whereas it might take a healthy person months or even years to reach that dark and terrible place, a narcissist might be able to reach it in a matter of hours. In order to function at all within this horrific handicap, narcissists need a steady supply of the necessary feedback from other people that they then convert into momentary self-worth. Because they can create no self-worth of their own and they can't sustain whatever they receive from others, it doesn't last very long and they are soon teetering on the brink of collapse again. This is a big reason that so many of them seem to overreact to such small things or put such importance on things that don't seem to really matter. It's what's behind their entitled rages and their self-righteous tantrums, the pervasive fear and belief that they don't matter enough to get what they want or that they're too broken and awful to deserve anything. In order to combat that deep-seated belief, they've created the ego story that they are actually extremely important and therefore they deserve whatever they want or whatever they expect. When they don't get it, this narrative is punctured and all those bad feelings they were holding at bay come pouring through. It's overwhelming and it's usually painful, and because they have no self-worth to speak of, they have no way to self-soothe or to protect themselves from that. It's important to note here that suicide among those with narcissistic disorders is disproportionately high when compared with the rest of the population. Some studies put it at 20% when it's combined with depression, something many narcissists have lifelong issues with. Many people believe a narcissist would never kill themselves, but this is just a testament to how good their act really can be. The loss of self-worth and subsequent bottoming out is truly life-threatening to the pathologically narcissistic person because they have nothing at all to combat that with. And they know it even if they don't realize it because they are battling to keep it at bay all the time. This is why harems are necessary. One person is just not enough, especially considering that most narcissistic people use up the goodwill of others so quickly due to their atrocious behavior. And even when they're not overtly abusive, even the most solicitous, people-pleasing narcissist on the planet will eventually burn people out with their endless needs. They can't keep bringing the same old sob stories, heroic feats, and power trips to the same old people all the time anyway, because eventually these people stop reacting the way that the narcissist needs them to in order to feel validated. They get tired of hearing it, they stop finding it shocking or tragic or impressive, or they just stop listening because it's the same thing over and over again. This means that other people are needed who have not been exhausted yet. But what's the difference between a harem and a support system? There's actually a marked difference between a harem and a support system, although a narcissist might consider the harem their support system, and in a very literal sense, it is. A support system created by a person who is not a narcissist is comprised of people that they are friends with or their family too, who they trust, respect, and care about. There's healthy and equal give and take with all of the people supporting each other at different times. A narcissistic harem is not based on trust or respect, and there is no healthy give and take or equality because all of the people exist to support only one person, either voluntarily or through emotional extortion, and that person does not ever reciprocate. The people in the harem may also be independent, meaning they don't exist as an interrelated group or even know each other. Traditionally, people in harems were often slaves, and as slaves, they had no rights. They were treated like objects instead of people. The narcissistic harem is no different. These people exist in the narcissist's life solely for what they can give. There's no true interest in them as people or what they need, and not only is there no healthy give and take, there's no true give and take at all, because even when the narcissist appears to be giving, they are taking because of what is called mirroring. Through the process of mirroring, the narcissist presents a, quote, good image of themselves to somebody and receives approval, admiration, sympathy, or whatever from the other person in return. They're not doing it to benefit the other person in any way, no matter how it looks. It is done only so that the other person reflects positive feelings about the narcissist back to them like a mirror, which they then process into temporary self-worth. It's the only way they have to create any because, as we stated earlier, they can't create their own. Through careful examination of the narcissist relationship, this behavior will become very obvious. Love bombing is a perfect example of narcissistic mirroring, and it's one of the reasons love bombing is not proof that narcissists can give in relationships. Love bombing is not giving, ever. It's taking. It's important to understand here, too, that the, quote, positive feedback or supply that the narcissist is seeking from other people doesn't always mean things that feel good to the other person. It means things that feel good to the narcissist, and these might not be the same thing. It can be things like admiration and approval, but it can also be things like pity, fear, anger, or anything else. In this same way, the, quote, good image they are presenting of themselves doesn't necessarily mean what we think of as a good person, although it often is. It just means something that will create the reaction they are looking for from others, and that is usually the opposite of what they believe themselves to be. For example, if they feel they are a weak person, they may create an image of themselves that is intended to inspire fear or awe in others so that they can be validated as strong through other people's reaction to them. If they feel they are a monster or toxic waste or something else bad like that, they may create an image of themselves that's intended to inspire pity or sympathy in other people so they can be validated as a victim through other people's reactions. But it can also be less specific. Anything which validates their existence in any way can be enough. As an example of this, we might think of the pathologically narcissistic people who get supply through arguing, or of internet trolls who are only looking for any attention of any kind. The life of the narcissistic person is a performance of one, for one, by one, and other people are the props narcissists use to make the fiction more believable to themselves. If other people believe it, that makes it more real, and when it's more real, they can believe it, and they can convert it into self-worth, at least for a period of time. This is the function of the narcissistic harem. They are kept and farmed like a herd to be milked for whatever it is they can give the narcissist and left out to graze and be ignored when they're not needed. Because pathologically narcissistic people literally require, the input and cooperation of others to function, keeping a harem is not just a vanity move or their way of flexing their proverbial muscles. In a very real way, it is resource management or even hoarding that in many ways is no different than stocking your pantry with dry goods. If you understand your pantry to be as bottomless as the narcissist's needs are, then you would understand how much it will take to fill it. Narcissists exist in survival mode all the time. The pathological processes and perceptions that their mind developed in order to keep them safe as children have now trapped them in the idea that they are not safe, ever. Worse, they can't meet their own needs, self-soothe, or create self-worth, and because of that, they are dependent on other people to survive. As they have a deep distrust of all people, including themselves, and because their perceived experiences with just about everybody have been painful and disappointing, they don't feel that they can rely on other people to do for them what they need. This creates a deep-seated, all-pervasive insecurity about their ability to survive, and because of that, they endeavor to manipulate and control people in order to make sure that their needs will be met. The fact that narcissists are dependent on others means that other people are actually resources for narcissists like food and water. Objects, in other words, but necessary ones. When someone is in survival mode, they experience anxiety regarding their resources because they need them in order to live. For example, when there's a snowstorm, people rush out and buy milk and bread and water because they want to make sure they have enough just in case. Their anxiety over the situation requires them to do something about it, and buying these things makes them feel better. Plus, it's just logical to stock up in an emergency. The anxiety over the situation creates action with purpose. In this same way, creating a harem is the narcissist's way of making sure they have enough resources to live on in case anything happens, because when you're in survival mode, everything is an emergency, or it could become one very quickly. This is why we said earlier that though there's a very real difference between the two things as they are commonly understood in this context, a narcissist would probably say that their harem is their support system, and in this way it literally is. It's not just the stocked pantry that's important either. Their power over the stocked pantry matters too. It puts them in control. Power and control are very important to pathologically narcissistic people because they feel powerless inside. How could they not when they can't even meet their own needs? To control resources is to have power, and possibly the only power that matters, because if you control the resources, you have the ultimate power over your own survival. You are helpless no longer. People often experience narcissists' attempts to control them as the narcissist simply wanting to be in charge, but the stakes are much, much higher than that. If survival depends on others, then others must be controlled to ensure that they will do their part. This is one reason that triangulation between resources can happen. It's not just about wanting to get away with lies or continue on with bad behavior. It is much deeper than that. The narcissist wants to be sure to control the situation as much as possible and prevent exposure of things about them that would disrupt the flow of validation they need from these people, that would make the people no longer able to be farmed as resources. For example, if Jimmy knows something about Bobby that Bobby thinks makes him look bad, Bobby will do what he can to keep Jimmy away from his other resources so that Jimmy doesn't contaminate them with this bad image of him and cause that flow of validation that he needs, that supply, to dry up or change. This is actually very similar to the behavior of young children on the playground and can include keeping people separate or compartmentalizing them away from each other, turning them against each other, playing them off each other, smearing and discrediting Jimmy behind his back in the hope that this causes people to distrust Jimmy or not to listen to him, discarding Jimmy totally, and much more. If it's a group of people who are known to each other, Bobby will do what he can to control the information they receive about him. For example, if the group is people at his job, he will make sure never to bring Jimmy around the group. He may tell members of the harem that they can't be friends with Jimmy or other people that have damaging information, or Bobby will no longer deal with them. He may demonize people outside the group who know things about him that he doesn't want people in the group to find out. This is all about securing resources for survival. That's why they take it so seriously. Narcissists don't expend effort on something unless it really matters to them within their very limited scope, and survival definitely does. It is the entire focus of their whole existence. Perhaps the worst part of this is that most of them don't even realize any of these things are true or why they do the things that they do. They're just doing what they have always done in the way that they've always done it. This is how they survive. A crocodile doesn't look like a floating log because it wants to. It looks like a floating log because that's what it does. This doesn't excuse the abusive behavior of pathologically narcissistic people in any way, but it does shed some light on whether or not it can be changed. If their defense mechanisms could be penetrated and they could somehow be made aware that this is what they were doing, they probably still wouldn't be able to understand emotionally that it's wrong. The crocodile doesn't feel bad for tricking the zebras with his appearance. He doesn't feel anything except hungry. This is how he survives. Many people assume that narcissists attempt to control others out of the desire to hurt other people or out of the desire for power. These are actually both the same thing because the desire to hurt others comes from a need to feel powerful. As we've discussed, this is true in a manner of speaking. They do have a need to feel powerful, but a desire for power doesn't just exist for no reason. What creates the desire for power in the first place? A desire so strong that a disproportionate amount of somebody's time and energy would be devoted to creating, imagining, engineering, or securing situations where they can feel like they do have it. Obviously, this comes from feeling they have no power at all. There's no other reason for it. The truth is, despite their efforts, narcissists have no power over other people. They have no power over anything, including themselves, and they lack the necessary tools to take it. The extremes they go to get their needs met and the frantic efforts they make to control and manipulate others demonstrate very clearly how vulnerable and powerless they really do feel. All you have to do is look. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, through email, and via Skype. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops a few times a month, so if you're interested in seeing what we have running at this time, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day.